Welcome back to Vietnamese Case Files. Behind the glow of success in a foreign land, the Vietnamese community in the United States sometimes has to confront harsh realities and shocking verdicts that stir public outrage. In today's compilation, we will revisit 6 emblematic case files, where the line between those who uphold justice and those who break the law becomes more fragile than ever. From police officers who fell into a path of crime, to a senator who lost his integrity to greed, to the unjust deaths of young Vietnamese individuals and veterans at the hands of law enforcement, each story is a tragedy of betrayal, loss of control, and painful legal loopholes. Let's dive deep into every detail to uncover the costly lessons behind each of these cases. And if you enjoy investigative true crime content and want to follow along with Vietnamese case files and upcoming cases, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. Now, let's begin. Dallas, a city shining with technology and luxury skyscrapers. But behind that glamorous exterior, in early 2025, a series of sophisticated thefts at Apple stores shocked the entire city. There were no signs of forced entry, no security alarms were triggered, and the cameras seemed to have been blinded at the exact moments when the merchandise disappeared. iPhones, iPads, AirPods, everything was taken perfectly, neatly, and cleanly, as if the hands behind it belonged to someone being paid to protect the place. Quiet investigations began. The FBI and Apple's global security team traced every frame of footage, every access log, every door opened at midnight. And then they uncovered something no one could believe. The thief was not a professional criminal, nor a rogue employee, but a police officer. Someone entrusted with maintaining order had used his own authority to betray it. So who was he to be so bold? And how did the FBI manage to track him down among countless vague and fragmented clues? Right now, join Vietnamese Case Files as we reopen this intense case file and uncover the truth step by step. Please note that all content in today's video has been researched and compiled by our team from multiple sources. If there are any inaccuracies or details that need correction, please leave a comment below so we can update and revise accordingly. Before we dive into the details, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss other gripping cases on Vietnamese Case Files. Thank you all for your support. In early March 2025, management at several Apple stores in Dallas began noticing irregularities in inventory. At 3 major retail locations, Apple North Park, inside North Park Center, Apple Knox Street, Knox Shopping District, and Apple Galleria Dallas Mall, the actual stock levels showed significant discrepancies compared to recorded figures. Employees also discovered that many products had gone missing from storage despite no signs of a break-in. Internal reports revealed that all 3 of these stores ranked among the top 10 Apple stores worldwide with the highest inventory discrepancies during the recent period. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, Apple's global security team launched an investigation and notified authorities. By mid-March, a joint investigation between Apple Global Security, the FBI, and the Internal Affairs Unit of the Dallas Police Department was quietly initiated. Investigators began conducting detailed reviews of each store's premises. Inside the Apple Store storage rooms, investigators observed a very clean pattern of theft. There was no footage of intruders breaking in, nor any signs of forced damage. The storage doors were only opened according to normal schedules. Even late-night openings of security doors were carried out using valid keycards. This initially left the investigation team at a dead end. The thief seemed to be invisible within a highly advanced security system. However, at the scene itself, a small clue began to emerge: unusual movements of the internal security cameras. When reviewing past footage, investigators noticed certain periods when cameras were angled away or zoomed incorrectly, missing key shelving areas. This suggested that someone may have intentionally monitored and adjusted the camera angles for their own purposes. This detail immediately raised suspicions of internal involvement, as it would require someone familiar with the store's security system, possibly even a member of the security team. As a result, night shift security personnel hired by Apple from external contractors quickly became persons of interest. Although the group of suspects had been narrowed down, identifying the exact individual remained difficult due to the lack of direct witnesses and the broad scope of suspicion. Apple employed both private security personnel and off-duty local police officers for night shifts. Investigators had to consider whether the culprit was a private guard, a cleaning staff member, or even an off-duty police officer. In truth, Every possibility was equally alarming. The Apple Global Security team then extracted access logs for the storage doors and uncovered a shocking detail. Multiple late-night door openings consistently occurred during the shifts of a particular security staff member. This individual accessed the storage area more frequently than necessary. However, further confirmation was needed, as there were instances of guards covering shifts for one another. To break the deadlock, Apple decided to install hidden cameras at strategic locations within the storage areas, specifically in the blind spots not covered by the existing system. This operation was kept strictly confidential, with no staff being informed. In the following nights, the security team continued their routine work, unaware that every shadowed corner was now under surveillance. Soon after, the security team captured the footage they needed, a video showing a man in a security uniform wearing a black jacket labeled police, secretly stuffing boxes of merchandise into his jacket and backpack. Notably, the jacket he wore was a Dallas police tactical vest equipment designed to stop bullets and protect officers now being used to conceal stolen goods. The cameras further recorded him entering with an empty black backpack and a gray duffel bag, then leaving with them visibly filled with merchandise. At one point, he even climbed onto a high shelf and used a long grabber tool to pull down boxes of AirPods Pro from above. Most importantly, the thief's face was finally revealed on camera. It was Lei Shou, a police officer with the Dallas Police Department, working off duty as a security guard, the very person Apple had trusted to protect its stores. Investigators began carefully analyzing all footage captured by the hidden cameras. In the videos, Lei Shou was clearly seen concealing around 25 items during one theft at the Apple store in Dallas Galleria, valued at approximately $17,271, and in another instance, taking about 32 items from Apple Knox Street, valued at approximately $14,280. Combined with several other incidents, the total value of stolen goods was determined to be approximately $37,806, falling within the threshold of a third-degree felony under Texas law. Moreover, the footage clearly showed Lei Shou's method. He would bring an empty backpack into the storage room, fill it with Apple products and additional bags, hide items under his police jacket, and then casually carry them out as if they were personal belongings. Apple employees reported that Lei Shou often worked night shifts alone, giving him unrestricted access to the storage area. Some employees recalled occasionally noticing in the mornings that storage doors had been opened or that one or two empty boxes had been left behind, but no one suspected anything due to their trust in security personnel. These testimonies, though indirect, helped illustrate Lei Shou's pattern and opportunity to commit the crimes. Shortly afterward, Apple's security team also provided investigators with screenshots from the Facebook account of Lei Shou's wife. Coincidentally, this account had been actively listing numerous brand new Apple products for sale on Facebook Marketplace. Upon comparison, these devices matched the stolen items in both type and serial numbers, including iPhones, AirPods, and other components. This indicated that Lei Shou's wife was an active accomplice, responsible for distributing the stolen goods taken by her husband. This evidence further strengthened the link between Lei Shou and the stolen merchandise. However, to conclusively close the case, investigators decided to set up a discreet arrest operation to avoid alerting the suspect. They quietly monitored the movements of Lei Shou and his wife, waiting for the right moment. Through surveillance, police learned that Lei Shou and his wife were planning to leave Dallas on April 23, 2025. It was likely that they intended to temporarily disappear or take a break after successfully carrying out a series of thefts. Therefore, instead of making an arrest at the store, which could attract attention and pose risks to others, the FBI chose to intercept Lei Shou at an unexpected location. Dallas Fort Worth International Airport, DFW. On the morning of April 23rd, when Lei Shou and his wife arrived at DFW Airport, FBI agents and undercover officers from the Dallas Police Department quietly followed them. At exactly 6 in the morning, just before the couple checked in for their flight, a team of agents suddenly moved in. Lei Shou was separated, restrained, and informed that he was being detained for investigation. His wife was also held for questioning right at the airport. The operation was carried out smoothly, and surrounding passengers were largely unaware that a police officer had just been arrested for theft. At the same time, while the couple was being detained at the airport, another investigative team executed an emergency search warrant at their home in Dallas. There, police seized a large quantity of brand new Apple products still in their original packaging, stored inside the house. These items became clear physical evidence of the theft. After initial questioning, Lei Cho was handed over to the Dallas Police Department for further legal processing. Faced with undeniable evidence, he remained silent and requested a lawyer. By July 10, 2025, the Dallas Police Department officially issued an internal warrant and ordered Lei Cho to surrender. Realizing he could not escape justice, Lei Cho turned himself in at the Dallas County Sheriff's Office as ordered. He was immediately taken into custody and charged with theft of property. The Dallas Police Department also suspended him from duty, confiscated his weapon and badge, and awaited the final outcome of the investigation. The entire investigation lasted 4 months, a challenging journey to uncover the truth, which ultimately exposed a traitor hiding behind the badge. The case quickly stirred public attention, especially within the Vietnamese community in Dallas, as the perpetrator was a Vietnamese American police officer. According to available information, Lei Cho, now in his 30s, had been serving with the Dallas Police Department since May 2013. According to some unofficial sources, Lei Cho immigrated to the United States at a young age and grew up in the Vietnamese community in Texas. His role as a police officer in Dallas had once been seen as a source of pride, a bridge between law enforcement and the local immigrant community. He currently held the rank of senior corporal, equivalent to a seasoned non-commissioned officer. He had previously been assigned as an instructor at the Dallas Police Basic Academy, indicating that his superiors had placed significant trust in him. In his personal life, Lei Cho was married to Trinh Minh Thi, a fellow Vietnamese in her 30s. The couple had no children and lived in a home in northern Dallas not far from the Apple stores where the thefts occurred. Friends and colleagues initially described Lei Cho as quiet and reserved, with no noticeable signs of misconduct. His personnel record showed no prior criminal history or significant disciplinary violations. However, through the course of the investigation, the true portrait of Lei Cho gradually emerged. Behind the police uniform was a calculating and greedy individual. In terms of finances, Lei Cho's police salary ranged from approximately $60,000 to $70,000 per year, an income sufficient for basic living, but hardly enough to sustain a luxurious lifestyle in the United States. Meanwhile, his wife did not have a stable job and mainly stayed at home, running small-scale online sales. Some sources suggested that the couple was carrying a significant amount of credit debt, and financial pressure may have been what pushed Lei Cho down the wrong path. However, this remains only a hypothesis, as Lei Cho himself has never admitted to any specific motive. His sophisticated actions indicated a carefully planned scheme, from deliberately taking on off-duty security work at locations storing high-value goods, to exploiting the authority of his police uniform, and finally distributing stolen items through his wife's online sales accounts. In short, Lei Cho fully exploited his role as a protector to become a betrayer operating in the shadows. Preliminary assessments also showed no signs of mental instability. His actions were deliberate and clearly driven by personal gain. Therefore, for the public and his colleagues, the greatest shock was not just the financial loss, but the fact that a long-serving police officer had betrayed his oath to uphold justice, using the image of integrity to conceal his crimes. To better understand Lei Cho's mindset and behavior, it is necessary to look back at the entire course of his criminal activity as reconstructed by investigators. It all began in 2023, when Lei Cho started working night shifts as a security guard for a chain of Apple stores in Dallas. By day, he was a model police officer. By night, he took on extra work patrolling high-end tech retail stores. Over time, Lei Cho quickly recognized a golden opportunity at his workplace. Apple Store stockrooms were filled with compact yet high-value devices, and after closing hours, these areas were often deserted. Combined with the complete trust placed in him, along with access keys and entry cards, he realized he held a rare and advantageous position. He began probing the security system by studying camera placements, tracking patrol routes of other guards, and observing how Apple responded to minor inventory discrepancies. It is likely that at first, Lei Cho only tested the waters by taking 1 or 2 small items. Indeed, the disappearance of 1 or 2 AirPods or an Apple Watch would be difficult to detect immediately. Seeing that no one suspected anything, his greed gradually grew. By 2025, Lei Cho decided to escalate. He targeted stores with large inventories such as North Park, Knox Street, and Galleria, rotating between them to collect goods and avoid taking too much from any single location. On each night he carried out a theft, Lei Cho planned meticulously. He arrived at the store in plain clothes like any other security guard, carrying an empty backpack and a folded duffel bag. After the store closed and all employees had left, he began his patrol. He deliberately checked the cameras to identify blind spots, while also adjusting their angles to make it easier to steal items. One colleague later recalled that he often stood in front of the CCTV monitor for long periods, appearing focused, but in hindsight, he was likely waiting for the right moment. Around 2 to 3 in the morning, the quietest time of the day, Lei Shou made his move. He opened the storage room using his keycard and entered silently. Calmly, he gathered brand new AirPods and iPads, hiding them inside his jacket and bags. His oversized police jacket became the perfect tool to conceal stolen items. From the outside, he looked like nothing more than a guard in a black jacket, completely normal. Next, Lei Shou dragged a small ladder to the phone display area. He selected brand new iPhone boxes and placed them into his backpack. Each iPhone was worth thousands of dollars, but small enough to carry easily, taking 5 to 7 at a time was effortless. His growing greed pushed him to take as much as possible, yet he remained cautious not to take too much from a single location to avoid leaving traces. Once finished, Lei Shou calmly exited the storage room. He turned off the lights, locked the door carefully, and casually carried the bags out to his patrol car. Because he was wearing a police uniform, even if building security or other patrol personnel saw him, no one would suspect anything, a perfect shield for his crimes. He then drove home as if he had just completed a normal shift. For months, the thrill blinded Lei Shou. He believed that as a police officer, no one would suspect him. This mindset, "I'm the gatekeeper, who would dare check me?" drew him deeper into crime. With each successful theft, he grew more confident, more daring, and began taking larger quantities over time. From just a few boxes of AirPods in the beginning, he escalated to stealing dozens of AirPods, iPhones, and iPads in each run. His ambition for illegal profit completely overshadowed the sense of law and duty he had once been trained to uphold at the police academy. As for his wife's role, this appeared to be a family operation. Lei Shou handled the supply while his wife managed the sales. The very next morning after each theft, she would sort the products, take photos, and list them on Facebook Marketplace. Many posts advertise iPhones as 100% new, never activated, priced several $100s below market value. Everything went smoothly until Apple grew suspicious and set a trap for Lei Shou using hidden cameras. But Lei Shou had no idea that the net was tightening around him. He continued carrying out a few final thefts in late March and early April 2025, until the day he and his wife were intercepted by the FBI at the airport. The moment he was handcuffed, he likely realized that everything was over. His dream of illicit wealth had collapsed, and his 12-year police career had come to an end. After his arrest, Lei Shou faced a strict criminal prosecution process. The Dallas County prosecutor quickly completed the case file, charging him with theft of property valued between $30,000 and $150,000, a third-degree felony under Texas law. The maximum penalty for this charge could reach up to 10 years in prison, along with a fine of $10,000. On July 12, 2025, Lei Shou appeared in court for the first time for a detention hearing. During the preliminary hearing, his defense attorney requested bail. Considering that Lei Shou had a previously good background, had served many years in the police force, and had voluntarily surrendered, the judge granted him conditional release pending trial after posting bail. As a result, he was temporarily free under strict conditions, with his firearm confiscated, passport revoked, and required to wear an electronic monitoring device. Lei Shou's wife has not yet been formally charged. Authorities stated that the investigation into her role is still ongoing. If sufficient evidence is found, charges of possession and distribution of stolen property may be filed in the next phase. Meanwhile, the Dallas Police Department launched a parallel internal investigation. By August 2025, the results were announced, confirming that Lei Shou had been dismissed from the force. The department also cooperated closely with prosecutors, handing over all relevant documents and evidence to support the case. At the grand jury hearing, jurors unanimously voted to indict Lei Shou on theft charges. Throughout the legal proceedings, the defendant remained silent, making only one statement through his attorney: "My client will not comment at this time." There was no public apology or justification, which further fueled public outrage. The official trial is expected to take place in early 2026. Due to the seriousness of the case, the Dallas County Court requires additional time to prepare documentation, summon witnesses, and examine evidence. Prosecutors are expected to present video recordings and seized physical evidence as compelling proof before the jury. The defense team may attempt to negotiate a plea agreement to reduce the sentence based on the defendant's cooperation in surrendering assets and his prior record of community service. At present, Le Chaux faces an uncertain future. If convicted, he will likely serve multiple years in prison, permanently ending his law enforcement career and bearing the label of a traitor to the very profession he once swore to uphold. This, however, is a fitting outcome for someone who lost his way and exploited the trust of both a corporation and the community for personal gain. The case of Le Chaux stealing from Apple stores has caused a major shock in Dallas and among overseas Vietnamese communities. Local media widely reported on the case, highlighting the irony of a police officer stealing from the very place he was assigned to protect. Public reaction was one of disbelief, not only because of the financial losses, but because a symbol of trust had been shattered by the very person who carried the badge. The Dallas Police Department issued a press statement, emphasizing that this was an isolated incident and did not represent the entire force. They stressed that the vast majority of officers continue to serve the community with dedication and uphold the honor of the profession. However, the department also acknowledged that the case serves as a wake-up call regarding personnel screening and internal oversight. The department committed to conducting a comprehensive review of policies allowing officers to work off-duty, especially in positions with potential conflicts of interest such as guarding high-value assets. For them, this case is not only a stain, but also a costly lesson about trust, professional ethics, and the fragile line between a protector and a criminal. In June 2019, the Fitchburg Police Department received a report from a young woman. Over the phone, she described something almost unbelievable. A state senator had taken a gun and threatened her elderly aunt. As soon as the information was received, Fitchburg police officers and investigators arrived at the scene. It was the small home of a widowed woman. The first thing they saw was the front door left slightly ajar, with the lock showing signs of forced tampering. The homeowner was still shaken, her thin hands trembling as she gripped her granddaughter's shoulders. In panic, she kept repeating the name Dean Tran, leaving the officers stunned because that was the name of a sitting state senator. As they moved deeper inside, the scene revealed even clearer clues. The family gun safe, located in a workroom at the back of the house, had been left wide open. Inside, the other firearms were still there, except for one unusually empty space. The woman pointed to it, sobbing, and said that her husband's Colt .45 was missing. According to the victim's statement, she was 70 years old and the widow of a veteran who had served in World War II. After her husband passed away, she had to manage the house and all of the couple's shared property on her own, including the gun collection her husband left behind. Because she knew little about firearms, she always felt anxious about keeping them in the house. However, instead of turning the guns over to the police herself, she thought of asking State Senator Dean Tran for help, someone she had voted for as her representative and a familiar face at community events. He agreed to come to her home and introduced himself as someone who could help take care of the guns in a safe way. According to the victim, that day, Dean Tran used his personal influence to persuade her to sign a contract transferring all of her late husband's firearms to him in exchange for $1,500 in cash. However, by that evening, she began to regret it when she realized the amount was far too little compared with the collection's true value. She called and asked Dean to return the firearms, hoping to keep them as her last mementos of her husband. The senator agreed. True to his word, early the next morning, he brought 8 guns back to her home. She thought the matter had ended peacefully, but the widow did not expect that only a few hours after returning the guns, Dean Tran would suddenly come back. According to her account, at around dawn, while she was home alone, Dean abruptly stormed straight inside. He forced her to hand over the key to the gun safe, acting aggressively, completely different from the calm demeanor he had shown the day before. Terrified, she rushed to her bedroom, shut the door tightly, and hid inside, but she could still hear Dean Tran rummaging around outside. When the house finally went quiet, she cautiously stepped out to check and discovered that the Colt .45, a keepsake tied to her late husband, had vanished from the safe. These initial details quickly helped investigators sketch out a brazen scenario. An elected official was suspected of exploiting trust to seize property from his own constituent. If the statement was accurate, this was not merely an ordinary legal violation, but a serious betrayal of public service ethics. Police then urgently collected evidence, including fingerprints around the safe and the entryway, as well as the contract bearing Dean Tran's signature. That same morning, Fitchburg police also contacted the Massachusetts Attorney General's office to report everything. Immediately after receiving the case, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office formally opened an investigation. Because the named individual was a sitting state senator, the file was transferred to the Public Corruption and Integrity Unit. Seasoned investigators quickly began interviewing witnesses and gathering and reviewing relevant records. In terms of physical evidence, the gun sale contract was considered a key detail in the case. It contained Dean Tran's signature, the victim's signature, and a list of 8 firearms being transferred. This document indicated that Dean Tran had directly participated in the transaction involving those weapons. Even if he claimed it was a lawful agreement, the legality of the transaction was still questioned, because private firearm sales must comply with strict licensing procedures. At the same time, forensic officers collected fingerprints and footwear impressions from inside the house. Forensic results later showed that Dean Tran's fingerprints matched the prints found on the gun safe and around the entryway, confirming his presence at the scene at the time the incident occurred. However, when police contacted the suspect, Dean Tran, through his attorney, issued a statement insisting he was completely innocent and willing to cooperate with investigators. Even so, investigators noted that during the first interview, Dean was evasive and repeatedly contradicted himself. At first, he denied any gun-related transaction and claimed the elderly woman had fabricated the story. When shown the contract bearing his own signature, Dean shifted to admitting he had purchased the firearms, but insisted it was merely an act of helping the victim and that there had been no coercion. As for what happened the next morning, Dean continued to deny it, claiming there had been no break-in and no gun taken as alleged. He even implied the victim was not mentally sound, and that this was why she made such accusations. During follow-up investigation, police executed a court-authorized search of Dean Tran's home and office. The goal was to find the missing Colt .45, but no physical evidence was recovered. Later, investigators determined that once Dean realized he was under intense scrutiny, he quietly returned the gun to the victim through an intermediary a few weeks after the incident. This ensured the Colt was recovered safely, but it also suggested he had attempted to conceal his actions. The investigative team also found inaccuracies in the gun license renewal paperwork that Dean Tran submitted in May 2019. Specifically, he failed to disclose that he had just purchased additional firearms under the contract with the victim, an omission considered a false statement on an official document and a violation of firearm regulations. It did not stop there. Evidence also showed that after the incident became public, Dean had sent a letter to the victim demanding that she write an apology letter. In that letter, he subtly pressured her, suggesting that she was the reason his reputation had been damaged and that she should be held responsible for it. Piece by piece, these details formed a clearer picture. Dean Tran had exploited the trust of an innocent citizen for personal gain, and when his reputation was threatened, he tried to cover up his conduct while shifting blame onto the victim. The investigation then lasted for more than 2 years, largely because Dean was still a sitting official, requiring the legal process to proceed with extreme caution. In November 2020, Dean Tran ran for re-election to the state Senate but lost, surrendering the seat to a Democratic opponent. After leaving the state Senate, he pivoted to a run for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 2022 election. But right in the middle of that congressional campaign, on July 1st, 2022, a Worcester County grand jury formally indicted Dean Tran on a series of criminal charges related to the incident involving the elderly woman's gun. The grand jury indictment listed a total of 6 charges, including taking a firearm, i.e. larceny of property valued over $250 from a person over 60 years old, making false statements on a gun license renewal application, fraudulently obtaining a signature, providing false information to police during the investigation, and obtaining property by confinement or threats. These charges underscored the seriousness of the case, especially the count related to obtaining property by inducing fear, indicating that prosecutors viewed the act of coercing the elderly woman inside her home as violent in nature, closer to robbery than ordinary theft. When the indictment was made public, Dean Tran immediately denied all allegations. He appeared at Worcester Superior Court on July 28, 2022 for arraignment and entered a not guilty plea to every charge. Earlier, Dean posted on his personal Facebook page that the allegations were completely false and claimed the timing of the indictment was politically motivated. He argued that Attorney General Maura Healey, a Democrat, had deliberately tried to disadvantage him by undermining his congressional campaign. thereby helping his opponent, Lori Trahan. Not stopping there, Dean quickly filed a federal lawsuit against Healy, accusing her of abusing prosecutorial power for political purposes. In response to these claims, Healy's office declined to comment, citing the principle of not discussing cases pending trial. Despite Dean's denials and legal complaints, prosecutors and the court remained determined to bring the matter to light. However, due to the complexity of the case file, the criminal trial over the gun incident was not scheduled to be heard until 2025. While awaiting his court date, Dean Tran continued running for Congress and lost in November 2022 before facing another legal storm, this time at the federal level, over alleged fraud involving pandemic relief benefits. Specifically, Federal Department of Labor inspectors reviewed the records and found a period in which Dean Tran received unemployment benefits while still having significant income at the same time. Tracing the information on the benefit application, they identified leads connected to Dean's sister's company, Tuet T. Martin, and also uncovered emails between the two discussing a job offer letter with multiple suspicious details. Investigators, therefore, determined that when the COVID-19 pandemic erupted in early 2020, Dean Tran, despite being entangled in an ethics scandal at the state Senate, still did not miss an opportunity to profit financially from the government's relief programs. In January 2021, Dean Tran officially left the state Senate after losing the election. Once he was no longer receiving a salary, he began looking for ways to take advantage of emergency relief packages. Dean knew that at the time, the government was implementing pandemic unemployment assistance for people who had lost income due to COVID. Even though he had just completed his term and did not meet the usual definition of unemployment, he still sought a way to claim a portion of those funds. To pull this off, Dean constructed a fairly sophisticated scheme. He asked his sister, Tuet T. Martin, the owner of a food company in New Hampshire, to create a fake job offer letter. The letter stated that Martin's company had offered to hire Dean Tran, but for objective reasons, he was unable to accept the position. The purpose of this letter was to prove that Dean had lost a job opportunity due to the impact of the pandemic. He edited the document and backdated it, and even forged his sister's signature to make the file look legitimate. With this carefully prepared set of false paperwork, Dean Tran submitted an application for benefits, claiming he had lost income and could not take a new job because he had to care for a young child during the pandemic. In reality, shortly after leaving the state Senate, Dean found paid consulting work for an auto parts business in New Hampshire. Throughout that period, he collected consulting pay while also receiving weekly COVID-related unemployment benefits. By the end of 2021, Dean Tran had received a total of $30,120 in federal unemployment benefits. Not only that, when filing his 2021 tax return, he also concealed $54,700 in income earned from the auto parts company. When she realized authorities were starting to pay attention to the case, Martin panicked and deleted certain emails related to arranging the job offer letter. However, digital forensics specialists later recovered the deleted data. In November 2023, the FBI arrested Dean Tran under a federal indictment containing 28 charges related to COVID benefits, fraud, and tax evasion. Around the same time, the FBI also arrested Tuet T. Martin in New Hampshire, charging her with 2 counts of obstruction of justice and 1 count of making false statements for providing false information to federal investigators and destroying evidence, namely the related emails. Once again, the public was left stunned. It turned out that beyond the gun incident, Dean Tran was also accused of quietly siphoning off relief funds during a period when many people were struggling desperately because of the pandemic. What stands out is that before becoming entangled in this string of scandals, Dean Tran had lived a relatively impressive life, with countless achievements in his career. Dean Tran was born in 1975 in Vietnam, moved to the United States with his family as a child, and grew up in Massachusetts. He graduated from Brandeis University in 1997, then built his life and career in the city of Fitchburg. Dean began his political path at the local level, serving as a Fitchburg city councilor before winning election to the Massachusetts State Senate in 2017 in a special election. He represented the Worcester and Middlesex district and served as an assistant minority leader in the Senate from 2018 to 2020. As the first Vietnamese American to enter the state legislature, Dean Tran was once expected to bring a diverse and fresh voice to Massachusetts politics. In his personal life, Dean Tran was married and had 4 children, and he was also often known as someone who emphasized traditional family values. In the eyes of supporters, he was once seen as a model example of a successful immigrant. However, behind that somewhat glossy image, many colleagues described Dean Tran's personality as containing plenty of contradictions. He was regarded as intelligent and politically sharp, but also competitive and rather impulsive. A report released in 2020 by the Senate Ethics Committee noted that Dean's office operated in a disorderly manner without clearly separating public duties from personal matters. Many staff members said they often felt uncertain, unsure whether they were carrying out official public work or doing personal tasks for their boss. In fact, in March 2020, the Massachusetts Senate Ethics Committee concluded that Dean Tran had violated the rules by using his office staff to participate in campaign activities during work hours. This led to him being stripped of a low-level leadership position, and he was also barred from direct contact with staff, with all communication restricted to official work email only. Notably, Dean later asked the state's highest court to overturn the matter, arguing that he had legislative immunity for actions alleged to have occurred while he was serving as a senator. However, in September 2025, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court rejected that argument and affirmed that he still had to face the criminal legal process. That detail suggested Dean Tran had a tendency to downplay the law, believing his political status could shield him from legal responsibility. After witnessing scandal after scandal, many of Dean Tran's former supporters were left deeply bitter and disappointed. They once saw him as a devoted father and a dedicated public servant. But over time, layer after layer of the facade was peeled away, revealing Dean Tran, in the end, as a fallen politician willing to break the law for personal gain and then trying to deny responsibility while blaming others and even the system itself. Dean Tran's case unfolded across multiple legal fronts, but the public's attention remained focused on the federal trial in late 2024 over benefits, fraud, along with the state court proceedings scheduled for 2025. At the federal trial in September 2024, Dean's defense attorney tried to portray him as a victim of political maneuvering, emphasizing that he had once been an opponent of multiple Democratic officials. On that basis, they argued the case was politically motivated and that the amount of money allegedly involved was insignificant compared with many other cases. They also insisted that Dean did not realize he was breaking the law because he believed he was eligible to receive the benefits. However, these arguments did not persuade the court. After 6 days of proceedings, the jury reached a unanimous verdict, finding Dean Tran guilty on all 23 counts, including 20 fraud counts and 3 counts of filing false tax returns. The outcome left Dean deeply dissatisfied. Soon afterward, in December 2024, he posted on his personal Facebook page calling on President Donald Trump to consider granting him a pardon. However, the appeal received no response and quickly faded, partly because Dean Tran's case did not carry a clearly political character, and partly because a president would have little ability to intervene in sentences under state jurisdiction. In February 2025, a federal court in Boston sentenced Dean Tran to 18 months in prison and 2 years of supervised release. He was ordered to repay $25,100 to the Massachusetts Department of Unemployment Assistance and $23,327 to the Internal Revenue Service, and to pay an additional $7,500 fine. At sentencing, Dean remained defiant, declaring he would appeal to the end and insisting there had been no fraud or misappropriation. In court, he continued to attack the investigation, claiming that the law was being turned into a political tool and insisting he was targeted solely because of political disagreements. Even so, the judge emphasized that an 18-month prison term was necessary as a deterrent because no one is above the law, not even those who once held public office. Regarding the gun theft case, on June 2, 2025, Dean Tran agreed to plead guilty under a deal with prosecutors. He admitted to 3 charges: taking a firearm, witness intimidation, and making false statements on a firearms license application. In exchange, the more serious charges were withdrawn. The judge sentenced Dean Tran to 6 months in jail for each charge, but the sentences were to run concurrently and be served at the same time as the federal sentence he was already serving. In practice, this meant Dean would not have to serve additional jail time after completing the 18-month federal term, but his record would reflect an additional state-level criminal conviction. Even so, Dean Tran's legal troubles were not entirely over. As mentioned earlier, he still faced another case related to conflict of interest violations after being accused of using state employees for campaign activities. The criminal trial in Suffolk County is expected to be held in 2026. This means that even after serving his federal prison sentence and pleading guilty at the state level, Dean Tran still has to enter one final legal battle. And in the view of legal experts, if he is convicted in this case, he could continue to face additional penalties. As for his sister, Tuet Martin, she is also firmly denied the obstruction of justice and false statement charges, so her case was separated for a separate trial. By the end of 2025, Dean Tran had expressed an intention to plead guilty in the matter involving his sister in exchange for leniency, while Martin chose to go to trial to defend her name. Her trial is expected to take place in January 2026 and is believed to reveal further details about how the siblings attempted to cover their tracks. Dean Tran's case became a resounding wake-up call for the public in Massachusetts. On one hand, it enraged the public and gradually eroded trust in politicians. As someone who once swore to serve the people could profit from the very vulnerable, from taking property from a lonely elderly woman to siphoning off relief funds during the pandemic that were meant for workers who had lost their jobs. Dean Tran's downfall also left many of his former supporters deeply bitter. In particular, the Vietnamese community in Massachusetts, which had once placed so much hope and pride in him, felt an even sharper sense of disappointment. Across the press and social media, countless voices condemned him harshly, calling Dean Tran bottomlessly greedy, a disgrace to the Vietnamese community, and a betrayer of his oath of office. In the end, the case closed on the image of Dean Tran leaving the courthouse in an orange prison uniform, hands cuffed, eyes vacant. That image stood in stark contrast to the day he took his oath of office, back when he wore a neat suit and solemnly pledged to serve the people. At around 2:35 a.m. on Sunday, March 3, 2024, the quiet atmosphere along the 900 block of Dugan North was suddenly shattered by gunfire. Some residents jolted awake and quickly called 911 to report that someone had been shot. The gunshots came from an Airbnb house where a party was being held. The West Precinct Patrol Unit received a report of a person shot and was quickly dispatched to the scene. As officers approached the house, they immediately sensed the chaos behind the door. The lights were still on, and on the floor lay a young man in his 20s, motionless, surrounded by scattered shell casings and signs of a struggle. Overturned chairs, shattered bottles, playing cards, and a pair of dice scattered across the table and floor, along with cash bills strewn everywhere, everything suggested that a night of fun had turned into a bloody brawl. Birmingham Fire and Rescue paramedics were called to the scene. They performed a quick check and confirmed that the victim had died from a gunshot wound. At the time of death, he was dressed casually, as if he had been out partying, and he had a gunshot wound to the neck. This fatal injury caused blood to soak through his clothing. Around the victim, police recovered 7 9mm shell casings scattered across the area, indicating that multiple shots had been fired. Notably, all of the shell casings were found inside the house, reinforcing the assessment that the shooter fired from indoors rather than this being a drive-by shooting from the street. A nearby neighbor told reporters that they heard loud arguing inside the house, followed by multiple deafening gunshots in rapid succession at around 2:30 a.m. No one knew what the young man's name was. Police secured the scene that very night, unable to shake a series of haunting questions. What led to the shooting? Was the killer still hiding somewhere in the darkness, or had they slipped away by blending in and fleeing with the party guests? The house showed no signs of forced entry from outside, no broken doors, and the windows were intact, so the initial theory leaned toward the shooter being inside the party before opening fire. That same night, authorities meticulously processed the crime scene, centimeter by centimeter. Under the flashing blue and red lights of patrol cars, the usually quiet North Pratt neighborhood suddenly became the focal point of a homicide investigation. This Airbnb house, originally rented for a party, now looked cold and eerie behind layers of yellow tape, marking a boundary no one was allowed to cross. The victim's body was given a preliminary on-scene examination by forensic personnel. He had been shot through the neck and died almost instantly from acute blood loss. In addition to that fatal wound, the victim had several small scratches and bruises, consistent with the possibility that he struggled before being shot. On the living room table, police noticed a set of dice and a few playing cards left mid-game, along with cash that had been left behind signs of gambling during the gathering. This detail was carefully documented immediately, as it could point to a financial motive. If someone fired a gun to steal money, it was likely that the cash on the table was what sparked the crime. Near the entryway, investigators recovered a baseball cap that had fallen to the floor and a mobile phone with a shattered screen. It was not yet clear who these items belonged to, but they could be important clues, objects the perpetrator or a witness may have dropped in the chaos. Any fingerprints, shoe impressions, or potential DNA traces on the evidence were carefully collected and sent to the lab for analysis. Overall, the living room showed clear signs of a struggle. Chairs had been knocked over, a small table had been shoved into a corner, and shards of broken glass were scattered across the carpet. The TV was still on, but the screen showed only static, perhaps from being knocked over or hit hard. All of these details painted a dramatic picture of the final moments before the killing occurred. Another notable lead was the home's security camera system. The property owner had installed cameras in the living room and at the front door to monitor the house. Early that morning, technicians removed the camera's hard drive and took it back to headquarters for analysis. In the first hours after the crime, police focused on securing the scene and collecting evidence, while also reviewing information related to the Airbnb renters in order to identify the victim. The homeowner said the house had been rented by a group of young men for a weekend night party. However, the rental record listed only the name of the person who booked the stay and did not include a complete list of everyone who attended. As a result, identifying the victim initially faced some difficulty because he was not the person who rented the house and there was no one at the scene who could recognize him and provide information about him. The victim was not carrying any identification, making his identity even more mysterious during the early hours of the investigation. In response, police used multiple investigative methods to determine who he was. The victim's fingerprints were taken at the scene and sent for comparison against the national database. At the same time, the broken mobile phone recovered at the scene was taken to the technical unit to attempt data recovery. Investigators hoped to find the victim's contacts or messages on the phone, clues that could lead them to his relatives or friends. Indeed, just a few hours later, the fingerprint match showed that the victim's information existed in the system. He was a 21-year-old young man who had previously obtained an ID locally. Meanwhile, technicians removed the SIM card from the broken phone, inserted it into another device, and found that the subscriber name matched the fingerprint results. The identity of the unfortunate victim was gradually coming into view. At noon on March 3, 2024, Birmingham police officially identified the victim as Phong H. Nguyen, 21 years old. However, they temporarily withheld his name from the public in order to notify the family and support the investigation. The process of identifying Phong Nguyen also revealed more about who he was. Phong, affectionately called Timmy by his loved ones, was the son of a Vietnamese family living in Alabama. When the family received the devastating news, Phong's parents and siblings were stunned and heartbroken, yet they worked with police and provided initial information about him. The family said that Phong Timmy Nguyen was born on October 15, 2002, and grew up in the Chalkville area outside Birmingham in a multicultural family. His father, Phuong Huynh Nguyen, is a Vietnamese American, and his mother, Shannon Davidson, is a Native American. Phong had several siblings, including half-siblings, and he grew up surrounded by the love and support of a large family. From an early age, Phong was known in the community for his selflessness and kindness, always putting other people's needs before his own. He was especially passionate about sports, having played basketball for the Pinson Valley High School team and later graduated from Clay Chalkville High School in 2020. Verifying Phong's educational background helped police gradually form a picture of a friendly, disciplined young man who was well-liked by many. The next important lead came from the victim's military background. The family revealed that Phong had recently enlisted in the United States Army, serving in the Airborne Artillery branch of the renowned 101st Airborne Division. According to his loved ones, what drove Phong to enlist was his desire to serve his country and protect those around him, true to his selfless nature. This made both police and the public even more heartbroken. A young soldier who had sworn to protect his country ultimately fell to gun violence in his own homeland. However, from an investigative standpoint, the detail that Phong had enlisted opened up a new line of inquiry. Phong military records were obtained, confirming his identity and providing additional information such as his height, weight, and distinguishing features. Moreover, investigators considered the possibility that Phong had received combat training and may have tried to restrain the shooter before being shot, something consistent with the signs of a struggle at the scene. As they learned more about the victim, police also tried to trace Phong's movements before he was killed. They spoke with his family and friends to find out where he went that night and who he met. The family said that on the evening of March 2nd, 2024, Phong asked permission to attend the birthday party of an old friend held at a rented Airbnb in the North Pratt area. It was his first time going to that address. He did not share details about who would be there, only that it was a weekend get-together with friends. Phong's mother recalled that her son loved lively atmospheres and was excited to join the party. This became an important lead. If police could identify the party organizer and the guest list, they could narrow down who was present at the time of the killing. However, gathering information from witnesses proved extremely difficult. No one volunteered to provide a list or identify the people who attended the party. Even though police appealed through the media for anyone with information to come forward, people seemed afraid of something. A wall of silence surrounded the case, causing the investigation to hit an early dead end. Once the victim's identity was confirmed, the Birmingham Police Department deployed its most elite resources to hunt down the perpetrator. A special task force was formed and led by seasoned detectives from the homicide unit. Police initially assessed that this was most likely a killing amid chaos at the party, rather than a break-in or a premeditated assassination. The shots fired did not appear to be directed at a single target in a methodical way, as suggested by the fact that as many as 7 shell casings were scattered around. The scene also showed signs of theft, as some of the money was missing. Therefore, the leading theory was that a robbery attempt during a card or gambling game escalated into gunfire. At the same time, police did not rule out the possibility that more than one suspect was involved, because it would be difficult for one person alone to control a group of guests, shoot the victim, and then escape smoothly. All recovered shell casings were sent for forensic analysis to determine the type of firearm and to potentially compare them with other cases. The results indicated that the 9mm casings were most likely fired from a semi-automatic handgun. However, the murder weapon was not found at the scene. The perpetrator may have taken it or disposed of it during the escape. Detectives entered the ballistic information into the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network to see whether it matched any previous shootings. Ballistics processing often takes several weeks, but this is a crucial step to determine whether the same gun was used at another scene. At the same time, the forensics team analyzed the broken phone and the baseball cap that had been recovered. From the phone, they restored several messages sent during the party and the most recent call log. Notably, at around 1 a.m., before the shooting, there was a message sent from the victim's phone saying, "Playing dice to make a little money so fun." The message was sent to a friend, further supporting information that gambling had been taking place at the party. Investigators immediately contacted the friend who received the message. This person said Phong had texted to brag that he was winning back the money he had lost last time. This detail led to speculation that Phong may have won money in the dice game, triggering someone else's greed. As for the baseball cap, a preliminary examination found several short hairs and sweat inside, possibly belonging to one of the guests. Police extracted DNA from the hairs, logged it into the case file, and planned to compare it once a suspect was identified. While waiting for forensic results, the investigative team shifted to witness statements. Their biggest challenge was the silence or conflicting accounts from people who knew something. Neighbors around the Airbnb admitted they had heard commotion, but they could only provide general details such as arguing and gunshots. No one dared to say they had seen a face or knew the name of anyone inside the house. This may have been because they were afraid of getting involved, or simply because they did not know the group of young men who rented the house and could not identify them. The investigators persistently pursued indirect leads. They checked ride history records in the area to see whether any pickups occurred shortly after the shooting. A few Uber rides were requested from the North Pratt area at around 3 a.m., more than half an hour after the incident, raising the possibility that some guests stayed to clean up before leaving. One Uber driver, when contacted, said he had picked up 2 to 3 young men from near the Dugan area, but he could not clearly remember their faces or recall any suspicious conversation. Police then obtained a court order to request mobile location data for all devices present near the North Pratt cell tower during the 2 to 3 a.m. time window that morning. This was a wide net, but it helped establish a list of phone numbers connected to the scene. Indeed, the results showed that around 11 mobile devices were connected to the network near the Airbnb house at the time of the crime, not including the victim's phone. Among them were numbers later identified as belonging to the victim, the person who booked the Airbnb, and several guests whom police were able to contact. However, two unfamiliar numbers appeared that could not be linked to any known person. This immediately raised police suspicion that these numbers likely belonged to the suspect. They documented both numbers for continued monitoring. Even so, despite intense focus, the investigation progressed rather slowly during the first few weeks. A major breakthrough came only after the investigative team received a lead from the security cameras. Technicians successfully recovered part of the video from the Airbnb house's living room camera. The footage, though it had no audio, captured the chaotic moment when the murder occurred. In the grainy images, police saw a group of about 6 to 8 people gathered around a table in the middle of the room. Suddenly, two young men, one wearing a black jacket, the other wearing a white shirt, appeared to lunge into a struggle with a young man in a red shirt, Phong Nguyen. Another person in the group ran off toward a corner of the room. In the middle of that chaotic frame, muzzle flashes burst repeatedly, 5 to 6 brief flashes matching the same moment when neighbors reported hearing gunshots. After the flashes, Phong collapsed, and the rest of the group panicked and fled the room. Among them, the two men in black and white hurriedly bent down to grab something from the table, likely money, then disappeared toward the front door as well. Even though the video quality was not high, investigators could make out the face of the person in white briefly turning toward the camera for a few seconds. He had a very youthful face, short cropped hair, and a small frame. The person in black wore a baseball cap and had his back to the camera, so his face was unclear, but his tall, thin build and a distinctive way of moving were captured well enough to serve as identifying markers. The camera also recorded the wall clock in the room showing 2:34 a.m. at the moment it happened, matching the timing of the 911 call. More importantly, the video made one thing clear: the two men in black and white were the perpetrators in Phong Nguyen's killing. One of them fired the shots, and both took part in grabbing the money before fleeing. With these images in hand, police immediately extracted a still image of the white shirt suspect's face from the video, along with images highlighting the black-clad suspect's build. They believed that if these images were released, someone might recognize the suspects. However, the task force decided not to publicize them right away to avoid alerting the perpetrators. Instead, they compared the white shirt suspect's image against the department's database of young offenders. Surprisingly, facial recognition software produced a fairly close match to a booking photo from an arrest in 2023. The record belonged to an 18-year-old named Davon F. Dorch, who had previously been arrested for possession of stolen property in the Knight Rider case the year before. This discovery made investigators' hearts race had they just uncovered the identity of a suspect. Still, caution was the top priority. Police did not jump to conclusions and continued checking the unknown phone numbers obtained from the mobile location data. The results showed that one of the two unknown numbers was registered under the name Davon Dorch. Now, it was almost certain Davon Fernando Dorch, 20, of Birmingham, was one of the two suspects involved in the killing of Phong Nguyen. He had a small build, about 1.63 meters tall and 56 kilograms, consistent with the smaller white shirt suspect seen in the video. There was also information suggesting Dorch often spent time in the Pratt City area, most likely the link that placed him at the party. After identifying Dorch, police continued pursuing leads on the second suspect, the man in black wearing a cap. They searched the database for young offenders known to operate in nearby areas. Then, a shocking update reached the task force. Ballistics from the shell casings in this case matched a shooting that occurred in East Lake, Birmingham, in June of 2024. That case was a street shootout that left a 19-year-old named Martavius Williams dead. More importantly, the primary suspect in that shootout had already been arrested, an 18-year-old young man named Cameron Javion Scales. Scales was arrested in late 2024 and is being held at the Jefferson County Jail awaiting trial. When detectives reviewed Scales' file, they were stunned to learn that he was 19 years old, from Bessemer A City, neighboring Birmingham, and had been linked to multiple incidents of violence. In particular, Scales had a tall build, about 1.85 meters, and the file also noted one detail: he liked wearing a black baseball cap. The booking photo taken when Scales was arrested also showed a baseball cap that looked very similar to the one recovered at the Phong Nguyen crime scene. Putting these details together, the task force decided to treat Cameron J. Scales, 19 years old, as suspect number 2 in the Airbnb shooting. By late March of 2025, after months of gathering evidence and connecting the pieces, Birmingham police were confident they had enough grounds to file charges. On March 25, 2025, detectives presented all evidence to the Jefferson County Magistrate's office and requested arrest warrants for both suspects. The magistrate approved and issued warrants for capital murder against Cameron Scales, 19, and Davon Dortch, 20. From that point, the investigation moved into the pursuit and prosecution phase for the two suspects. The police department immediately released a press statement announcing that 2 suspects had been identified and were wanted in the killing of Phong Nguyen. Birmingham was shaken by the news, especially after learning that one suspect, he was already in jail for involvement in 2 other homicides in 2024, while the other suspect, Dortch, appeared to have fled the state. An urgent arrest plan was put into motion. For Cameron Scales, executing the warrant was straightforward because he had already been held at the Jefferson County Jail. Investigators simply went to the jail and served him with the additional capital murder charge in the Phong Nguyen case. Scales did not seem surprised to be connected to this case. He remained cold and detached, neither admitting nor denying anything, and stayed silent while waiting for a lawyer. It seemed that being hit with yet another murder charge did not make the 19-year-old even blink. He likely understood that, with 2 prior killings, he was already facing severe punishment. In contrast, Davon Dortch was a much harder target to pin down. Local records indicated that after the homicide, Dortch left Birmingham. Leads from his friends suggested he had relatives in Atlanta, Georgia. Police contacted and sought assistance from a fugitive task force to help coordinate the search for Dortch. After nearly 2 weeks of hunting, U.S. Marshals finally traced Dortch to an apartment complex in Atlanta. On March 26, 2025, they raided the location and arrested Dortch while he was hiding there. The 20-year-old appeared stunned as he was handcuffed, likely not expecting police to track him down so quickly. After the arrest, Davon Dortch was held at the Atlanta City Jail for several days while awaiting extradition procedures back to Alabama. By early April of 2025, he was transported back to Birmingham under strict police supervision. By then, both primary suspects were in custody and were denied bond while awaiting their court dates. The task force officially closed the investigative phase and handed the entire case file over to prosecutors to prepare for charges in court. In short, the case-solving journey, lasting more than a year, moved from an early deadlock caused by a lack of witnesses through breakthrough after breakthrough driven by digital evidence and the courage of those who provided information, and ultimately succeeded in bringing 2 perpetrators to justice. In April of 2025, Cameron Scales and Davon Dortch were charged with capital murder in Jefferson County, Alabama, with the aggravating factor that the killing occurred during a robbery, an offense that carries the maximum penalty of death or life in prison without the possibility of parole. At preliminary hearings, Scales appeared cold and denied the charges, while Dortch looked tense and claimed he had been pulled into it. There were also rumors that Dortch might cooperate with prosecutors to reduce his sentence, possibly even seeking a separate trial so he could testify against Scales. Prosecutors are said to have a strong body of evidence, including security footage capturing the struggle and the gunfire, witness identification, ballistic testing linking the bullets to Scales' gun, and DNA and location data tying Dortch to the scene. The family of the victim, Phong Nguyen, has also hired a private attorney to seek the harshest possible punishment for the perpetrators. Legal observers believe the likelihood of convictions for both men is very high. At approximately 11:57 p.m. on June 13, 2017, the 911 dispatch center in King County, Washington, began receiving a series of frantic calls from a neighborhood in Burien. Residents reported hearing strange noises and seeing a barefoot young man wandering through the street in a delirious state, shouting bizarre phrases. Witnesses also said he appeared to be holding an unidentified sharp object and was proclaiming, "I am the creator." Shortly afterward, 2 King County officers were dispatched to the scene, a quiet residential neighborhood shrouded in darkness. As their headlights swept across the street, they spotted a small, thin young man, just over 1.6 meters tall, standing dazed in the roadway. He was barefoot and holding a small object in his hand that was difficult to identify. When police shined their flashlights and loudly ordered him to stop, the young man did not comply and continued moving forward in an agitated state. Believing he might be a dangerous individual armed with a weapon, one officer drew a taser to subdue him from a distance. 2 probes were fired, striking the suspect and delivering an electric current intended to incapacitate him and cause him to collapse. But contrary to expectations, he staggered yet continued moving forward. At that moment, Deputy Cesar Molina, a veteran officer of the King County Sheriff's Office, arrived on the scene to provide backup. Seeing that the taser had already been deployed, yet the suspect remained standing, Molina immediately sensed the situation was spiraling out of control. In the flickering lights, Molina saw the young man advancing toward another officer. That officer stepped backward but suddenly tripped and fell, leaving himself vulnerable. Meanwhile, the suspect kept moving closer, still holding what appeared to be a sharp object in his hand. In a split second, 3 gunshots shattered the silent night. Molina had drawn his firearm and fired, bringing the suspect down. The young man collapsed face down in the street, blood spreading from his wounds and soaking into his shirt. The incident was immediately reported to dispatch as suspect shot. Soon after, the wailing siren of an ambulance cut through the quiet residential neighborhood. Investigators quickly sealed off the scene during the night, floodlights reflecting off streaks of blood and the shiny brass shell casing scattered across the road. Officers cautiously approached the suspect, who was still barely alive. To their surprise, he was not holding any weapon at all. The supposedly sharp object turned out to be nothing more than a black plastic pen. A preliminary examination revealed that the victim had been struck by 1 bullet in the forearm and 2 in the back. Paramedics rushed him to Harborview Medical Center for emergency treatment. Meanwhile, at the scene, police collected evidence under flashing lights and the stunned curiosity of nearby residents. 3 shell casings were marked corresponding to the 3 shots fired. This detail caused experienced investigators to feel uneasy. Was something inconsistent with the claim that the suspect had charged toward the officers? If the situation truly required the use of lethal force, why were 3 shots necessary? To begin unraveling the mystery, investigators first needed to determine who the young man was. He carried no identification, had no vehicle, and left behind no personal belongings at the scene other than the pen. This made identifying him extremely difficult. At that moment, the only clue came from the strange words witnesses reported hearing. Police had initially been told that the man shouted, "I am the creator." However, when questioned more carefully, one trembling witness recalled that the young man might actually have been saying, "I'm Tommy, the tenant." This small detail gave investigators a spark of hope. It suggested that the victim's name might be Tommy and that he could be living nearby. Police immediately expanded the investigation. At dawn, officers began checking residential records and knocking on doors around the scene, asking whether anyone named Tommy lived in the neighborhood and whether any residents had heard unusual noises the previous night. Within a few hours, a key lead emerged. A Vietnamese family living not far from the scene reported that their nephew, Tommy Lay, had left the house the previous night and had not returned. This information immediately caught investigators' attention. They quickly coordinated with the hospital to confirm the identity. However, tragic news arrived soon afterward. Harborview Medical Center confirmed that the victim had succumbed to his injuries and passed away in the early hours of June 14, 2017. Through physical description and fingerprint comparison, police confirmed that the victim was Tommy Lay, 20 years old. He was the only son of a Vietnamese family living in Seattle. Tommy's parents were Vietnamese immigrants who came to the United States after 1975 and worked hard to build a life in King County. Tommy grew up in the local Vietnamese community, raised in a household that emphasized education and discipline. He was known as a gentle and introverted young man who loved reading philosophy, playing chess, and cooking. In the afternoons, people often saw Tommy gardening with his grandmother, tending vegetable beds in the backyard, or helping his father with yard work and landscaping. Staff at the nearby library knew him well because he frequently borrowed thick philosophical books, eagerly studying them despite his young age. Tommy dreamed of becoming a firefighter. He once told his family that he wanted to serve the community and do meaningful work. In 2017, Tommy was enrolled in the College Career Link program at South Seattle College, a program that allowed students to complete their high school diploma while earning college credits. His family and relatives were extremely proud to see Tommy becoming part of the first generation to achieve success in the United States. More tragically, on the morning of June 14, 2017, Tommy was supposed to put on his graduation gown and attend his graduation ceremony. Instead, his life ended forever at the age of 20. The revelation of the victim's identity solved the first piece of the puzzle, but it also pushed the case into a deeper tragedy. Tommy Lay, a quiet and gentle Vietnamese American young man, how could he possibly have become the knife-wielding attacker described by the police? His family was shocked and could hardly believe it. They insisted that Tommy had no criminal record and had never shown violent behavior or carried weapons. The journey to uncover the truth about who Tommy really was and what truly happened that night was only just beginning. A comprehensive investigation was launched. Initially, the case was assigned to the King County Sheriff's Office Force Investigation Team under the supervision of the County Prosecutor's Office. The crime scene had been preserved, but the greatest challenge was uncovering the truth amid conflicting accounts. Police maintained that the victim had attempted to attack officers, while physical evidence suggested he carried no knife at all, only a ballpoint pen. The first significant clue came from the forensic autopsy results. 2 of the 3 bullets lodged in Tommy's back had an upward trajectory. However, this raised an important question. If officers had truly seen the suspect charging toward them and fired in self-defense, the bullets would logically have struck the front of his body rather than his back. This detail suggested the possibility that Tommy might have been turning away or even attempting to run when he was shot, meaning he may have been struck from behind while in a vulnerable position. This became a crucial point that investigators needed to clarify. In the days following the incident, the crime scene was carefully re-examined once again. At the same time, civilian witnesses present at the scene were invited to provide official statements. Most of them were neighbors in the area who had been awakened by the disturbance. One couple said that before the police arrived, Tommy had knocked on their door in a panicked state while holding a small object. They assumed it might be a knife, which was why they called 911. Another witness said Tommy had been running down the street while muttering to himself, saying something like, "I'm the tenant, I'm Tommy." As a result, the witness statements were inconsistent. Some people insisted they had clearly seen a blade, while others admitted they were not certain. However, most witnesses generally agreed on one point. Tommy did not attack anyone in the neighborhood. He had only knocked over some objects in the yard and frightened residents, which led them to call the police. It was this fear and misunderstanding among the residents that laid the groundwork for the strong response from police when they arrived. Unfortunately, no video or photographic evidence captured the incident. In 2017, King County officers had not yet been equipped with body cameras. There were also no security cameras in the neighborhood that night. As a result, the investigation had to rely entirely on witness testimony and physical evidence. The statements from the officers involved became critically important, especially the report from Deputy Cesar Molina, the officer who fired the shots. However, according to the department's procedures at the time, Molina was not questioned immediately. Instead, he submitted a brief handwritten report the following day and was allowed to take time off to recover from the incident. It was not until 5 weeks after the shooting that Molina was formally interviewed. This delay was unusual compared to procedures in many other jurisdictions and was criticized by experts as a serious loophole in the investigative process. A long delay could allow memories to become distorted or even give officers the opportunity to coordinate their accounts. Indeed, when Molina was finally interviewed 5 weeks later, investigators from the King County Sheriff's Office did not challenge his statements with follow-up questions. They simply recorded what he said. Inconsistencies between Molina's statement and his initial report were also left unresolved. For example, he later claimed he fired while Tommy had his back turned, while his earlier report stated that Tommy had been charging forward. Investigators did not question this contradiction. As a result, the initial case file lacked many important details. There was no immediate interrogation transcript from Molina right after the incident, and no full reconstruction of the moment when the shots were fired. Investigators from the King County Sheriff's Office appeared more focused on proving that the victim had been carrying a knife than on examining the officer's conduct. They seemed almost fixated on finding a knife, overlooking the central question of whether Officer Molina had truly faced a threat serious enough to justify using lethal force. In the final report, the department's internal investigation concluded that Molina's actions were reasonable and consistent with procedure, and it recommended no corrective measures or disciplinary action. 14 months after the incident, the King County Sheriff's Office Use of Force Review Board, which included representatives from the police union and the department's legal advisors, also concluded that there had been no errors in the entire process. They recommended no improvements to tactics, training, or discipline. This internal conclusion only poured fuel on the fire for Tommy's family and the wider community. A young man had lost his life, yet the King County Sheriff's Office maintained that no one had done anything wrong. Determined to seek justice, Tommy's family hired attorney Jeff Campiche, a Vietnamese-American lawyer experienced in cases involving police violence. He began gathering independent evidence to uncover the truth. Campiche requested full access to the investigation files, forensic reports, and physical evidence. In particular, attorney Campiche brought in Dr. Wilson Hayes, a leading expert in forensic engineering analysis. Dr. Hayes is a mechanical engineer and accident reconstruction specialist with more than 40 years of experience in injury dynamics and forensic investigations. Using computer modeling and scientific methods, Hayes and his team reconstructed the moment Tommy Lay was shot based on wound trajectories, the location of shell casings, the relative heights of those involved, and witness testimony. Dr. Hayes' report revealed shocking findings. Ballistic trajectory analysis showed that at the moment he was struck, Tommy was either bent forward or already falling face down. One bullet entered his back and exited toward the abdomen, but the trajectory indicated that the skin on his abdomen had been pressed firmly against another hard surface. In other words, it suggested that at least one shot was fired when Tommy was already lying face down on the pavement. Furthermore, another bullet found lodged in Tommy's abdomen displayed unusual deformation in the casing. Dr. Hayes explained that one of the casing petals had been bent in a way that only occurs when a bullet strikes a hard surface immediately after leaving the victim's body. This further supported the theory that Tommy had been very close to the ground when the fatal shot struck him. In summary, the scientific analysis strongly suggested that Tommy Lay was shot while he was falling or already lying face down on the road, completely contradicting the police account that he had been charging forward. But the investigation did not stop there. The independent investigative team also discovered irregularities in the handling of physical evidence. A copper-jacketed bullet recovered from Tommy's body during the autopsy on June 14, 2017, labeled Sample C-24, did not match the appearance of the same bullet photographed at the Washington State Patrol Forensic Lab in February 2018. The original photograph showed the bullet's casing petals all dented inward, while the later photograph showed several petals bent outward. Dr. Hayes stated that such changes could not have been caused by the bullet striking the body. Instead, it appeared that someone had used pliers to bend the casing petals. In other words, the C-24 bullet appeared to have been tampered with while in the custody of the King County Sheriff's Office. This suggested a deliberate act of evidence manipulation. If the casing petals of bullet C-24 were altered, the victim's expert team would lose the ability to determine whether the scratches on the casing were caused by contact with bone inside the body or by striking the pavement. This detail was critical to proving that Tommy had been shot while lying face down. The family's attorneys filed a motion in court accusing the King County Sheriff's Office of intentionally damaging evidence and requested sanctions for this conduct. Although no individual was specifically named, the revelation fueled public suspicion that there had been internal protection within the department to prevent evidence unfavorable to the police from coming to light. During the investigation, the role of the King County Prosecutor's Office also became controversial. Normally, in cases where police shoot and kill someone, the county prosecutor reviews the case to determine whether criminal charges should be filed. However, Washington state law at the time required proof of malice, making it nearly impossible to prosecute police officers. As a result, in 2017, King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg did not rush to make a charging decision. Instead, he proposed holding a public inquest to clarify the circumstances before considering prosecution. However, this process stalled. King County suspended all such inquests to reform the procedures, and subsequent legal challenges caused the process to remain frozen for years. Growing frustrated, Tommy's family urged the state governor and the U.S. Department of Justice to intervene. But under state law, the Washington Attorney General could only open an independent investigation if requested by either the county prosecutor or the governor. Neither of these authorities took action. The family's lawyers argued that the county prosecutor's office faced a conflict of interest, as it was both considering criminal charges against Molina and representing the police department. This conflict, they argued, made prosecutors hesitant to pursue the case aggressively. As a result, Tommy Lay's family pursued another path in their fight for justice, filing a civil lawsuit in federal court against the King County Sheriff's Office and Deputy Cesar Molina personally. Based on the clues collected and the independent investigation conducted by the victim's family, a broader and more objective picture of the incident emerges. Near midnight on June 13, 2017, police received a 911 call reporting a young man causing a disturbance with a weapon in Burien. Deputy Cesar Molina was immediately dispatched to assist. As he drove through the dark streets, Molina heard over the radio that his colleagues had already arrived at the scene and that the suspect was refusing to comply with commands to stop. When Molina arrived, the first thing he saw was two fellow officers facing a small figure standing in front of a dark house. The person was shouting incoherently and waving something in one hand that looked like a knife. A taser had already been fired, causing the suspect to convulse, but he did not fall. Molina opened his car door and stepped out just as he saw the young man suddenly move toward the officer who had fired the taser. That officer stumbled backward and slipped, falling onto the grass. Flashlight beams flickered chaotically, making the situation even more confusing. In that tense moment, Molina looked at the object in the suspect's hand and believed it was a knife blade. The young man stood only a few meters away, his eyes wild and showing no sign of stopping. With more than 15 years of experience, Molina understood the danger of that distance. If a suspect with a knife comes within about 7 meters, an officer's life can be threatened before there is time to react. Molina shouted one last command, but the young man did not stop. Instead, he suddenly turned toward Molina. Molina briefly noticed his fallen colleague behind the suspect. If the man rushed forward, that officer could be seriously injured. The thought flashed through Molina's mind, and he felt the danger was immediate. His finger had already been resting on the trigger. As the suspect continued forward, Molina fired. The sharp gunshots tore through the quiet night. Molina fired 2 shots at the body in front of him. The suspect staggered and twisted sideways. Molina stepped forward and fired a 3rd shot, aiming at the arm holding the weapon. Only then did the young man collapse onto the pavement near the officer who had fallen earlier. Molina was breathing heavily, adrenaline still rushing through his veins. He approached and kicked the object from the suspect's hand to prevent any further resistance. Kneeling down, Molina turned the wounded man over and saw that he was a young Asian male with a very youthful face. His body was limp and blood had soaked through the back of his shirt. Over the radio, Molina heard a colleague report that the suspect had been shot and request an ambulance immediately. In the minutes that followed, Molina and the other officers handcuffed the young man and attempted to provide first aid until paramedics arrived. Molina quickly checked the area and realized there was no knife. A sense of unease began to surface, though the officer still believed he had seen a weapon. Shortly afterward, the on-scene commander instructed Molina to step back and cease involvement because department policy required that any officer who discharged a weapon be separated from the scene for investigation. Molina handed over his firearm to his superiors to be sealed as evidence. A few meters away, paramedics were performing CPR on the victim. According to Molina's later testimony, he said he fired to protect both himself and his fellow officer. He described that at the moment he pulled the trigger, the only thought in his mind was the risk that the young man might injure or kill someone if he was not stopped immediately. Fear and survival instinct guided the seasoned deputy sheriff to shoot down a suspect who weighed barely half as much as he did. In those brief seconds, he had to make a life or death decision, and he chose the most extreme option because it was the response he had been trained to use in order to protect lives. Molina did not know that the victim was holding only a pen, nor could he have imagined that the small young man in front of him had no intention of harming anyone. The civil lawsuit was filed in 2018 at the federal court in Seattle, seeking compensation and, more importantly, justice for Tommy. The civil litigation process lasted nearly 4 years. Attorney Jeff Campiche, representing the Lay family, persistently gathered records and requested the court to compel the defendants to provide all relevant evidence. Many shocking irregularities in the incident reports were revealed through filings submitted to the court. King County and the insurance lawyers representing Officer Molina initially denied all allegations, insisting that Molina had acted lawfully in self-defense. They filed a motion asking the court to dismiss the lawsuit, arguing that the officer was protected by immunity while performing his duties. However, the federal judge refused to dismiss the case, meaning the lawsuit had sufficient grounds to proceed. As the case moved into the pre-trial phase, King County adopted a tactic that angered the victim's family. They filed an appeal with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals over a procedural issue in an attempt to delay the trial. That appeal was later rejected by the appellate court, which even sanctioned King County for filing what it described as a baseless appeal intended to delay the proceedings. In other words, the higher court concluded that the appeal was merely a stalling tactic. Tommy's family believed this demonstrated that authorities feared the truth might be revealed in court and were attempting to prolong the case to pressure the plaintiffs into giving up. Nevertheless, the Lay family's attorneys remained determined. They asked that a jury consider all newly uncovered evidence, from Dr. Hayes' scientific analysis to internal emails from the sheriff's office. Tommy's father, Lay, publicly stated that money was not the priority. What the family wanted was accountability from the police before the law. However, the trial never took place. 3 weeks before the scheduled court date, King County contacted the family with a proposal to settle the case out of court. After negotiations, both sides reached an agreement. King County agreed to pay $5 million in exchange for the Lay family withdrawing the lawsuit. As part of the settlement, Officer Cesar Molina's name was also removed from the case, meaning he did not have to admit any personal wrongdoing. On March 24, 2021, in Seattle, the Lay family and their attorney held a press conference announcing the settlement. The amount was $5 million, considered a record compensation for a case involving a civilian shot by police in Washington state. The family agreed to accept the settlement on the condition that King County would review and reform certain policies. Speaking before the cameras, Tommy's father, Lay, choked back tears as he said that no amount of money could ever make up for the loss. Sitting beside him, Tommy's aunt held up his portrait, her eyes filled with tears. The atmosphere at the press conference was heavy with grief and frustration. Tommy's family said they accepted the settlement because they did not want to prolong the pain any further, but they would continue pushing for reforms within the policing system. On the side of King County, officials also released a statement acknowledging the settlement. However, something notable occurred that same day. The current sheriff, Mitzi Johanknecht, sent an internal email to the entire department. In that email, which was later leaked, she stated that the decision to settle did not reflect her personal view regarding Officer Molina's actions. She revealed that she had personally called Molina to offer encouragement and praised him for making a difficult decision that officers sometimes must make in the line of duty. She explained that the settlement was largely a calculation of legal risk in a politically sensitive climate rather than an admission of wrongdoing by the police. The email effectively poured cold water on efforts to calm public outrage. Tommy Lay's family expressed deep disappointment, arguing that the King County Sheriff's Office continued to refuse responsibility even after paying a substantial amount in compensation for the incident. On the other hand, many legal experts interpreted the $5 million settlement and King County's willingness to settle just weeks before trial as an implicit acknowledgement that mistakes had been made. After all, few believe that a government authority would pay such a large sum if it truly believed its officers had acted entirely without fault. As a result, the Tommy Lay case closed quietly in court, but its impact continues to echo. Although no criminal verdict was ever issued, a measure of justice was achieved through compensation and subsequent policy changes. Yet the pain endured by the victim's family, along with the lingering question, why did Tommy have to die so unjustly, remains like a scar that has yet to heal. On the night of May 17, 2024, the streets of Voorhees were quiet, illuminated only by the yellow glow of streetlights at the intersection of Route 73 and Cooper Road. Suddenly, a sharp crashing sound broke the silence, signaling that a serious collision had just occurred. Nearby drivers immediately stopped, rushed over to help, and called 911. When emergency responders and local police arrived, a chaotic scene unfolded before them. A vehicle with New Jersey license plates had its front end completely crushed after running through the intersection and colliding with another car. The driver was a man in his 30s, unconscious, his head slumped over the steering wheel, blood spreading across the seat. A few meters away, another car driven by a woman had also been damaged on the side from the impact. At first, everyone believed this was simply a tragic traffic accident. However, upon closer inspection, paramedics and officers were stunned to discover that the victim was not only injured from the crash, there were clear signs of a gunshot wound to his head. This discovery completely changed the initial assessment. It was likely that the driver had been shot just before losing control of the vehicle. The information was immediately relayed to the police department, confirming that the scene was no longer a routine accident, but a serious criminal case requiring immediate investigation. Looking around the roadway, police found several small-caliber shell casings scattered on the ground, likely from a handgun. This suggested that more than one shot had been fired before the crash occurred. The collection of these casings was carried out with extreme care, as they could be the most crucial evidence at the scene. Each casing was marked, bagged, and sealed for forensic analysis. Initially, the police's top priority was to provide emergency care for the victims and identify them. Inside the wallet of the man who had been shot, found at the scene, officers recovered his identification documents. Through this, the victim was quickly identified as Kishan Patel, 30 years old, an Indian American living with his family in Voorhees. According to the investigation, Kishan's parents were immigrants who had built a small business in New Jersey. He also worked at the family store, helping his mother open in the morning and returning home late in the evening to be with his family. On the night of the incident, Patel was driving home after a long day at work. Tragically, he was less than 2 minutes away from home when the incident occurred. After the incident, Patel fell into a deep coma due to a gunshot wound that penetrated his head, combined with spinal injuries from the crash. Doctors at Cooper University Hospital spent many hours performing surgery to save his life. Although he survived the critical stage, Patel suffered severe brain damage and a severed spinal cord, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down and almost completely unable to move. Once a healthy young man, he now depends on a ventilator and requires round-the-clock intensive care. The Patel family was devastated by the tragedy. His mother, Manjina Patel, visits the hospital every day, heartbroken each time she sees her son lying motionless in his bed. When police looked into Patel's personality and relationships, friends and acquaintances described him as calm, gentle, and rarely ever raising his voice at anyone. He had no known personal conflicts or disputes, and certainly no enemies. Therefore, the fact that he became the victim of a street shooting left everyone in shock. The first hours after the case was discovered passed in a tense and frustrating atmosphere. Initial investigative efforts yielded no progress. The intersection of Route 73 was equipped with city surveillance cameras, and several nearby businesses also had cameras, but the footage was too blurry. Investigators could only see 2 vehicles traveling side by side when suddenly a burst of gunfire came from a sedan. The vehicle then sped off into the darkness, leaving the other car to crash. However, no camera angle was clear enough to identify or read the license plate of the suspicious vehicle. Witnesses at the scene only managed to see a dark-colored sedan speeding away, unable to identify the plate number or the driver's face. The most concrete evidence remained the shell casings scattered at the scene. That very night, all casings were urgently sent to the ballistics lab for analysis. The preliminary results shocked investigators. The ammunition matched 9mm rounds commonly used in standard-issue handguns of the New York police. This discovery opened up a bold yet risky line of investigation. If the bullet indeed came from a police-issued firearm, could the shooter be an officer? That possibility alone was enough to weigh heavily on the investigation team, as it would represent a major shock not only to the community but also to the entire law enforcement system. However, they had no time to hesitate and immediately began searching for the suspicious vehicle. They reviewed the entire traffic camera system along roads surrounding the area, hoping to determine the sedan's direction after leaving the intersection. This effort quickly produced a notable lead. A camera at a nearby gas station captured footage of a dark-colored sedan stopping to refuel shortly after the shooting. In the video, the driver appeared wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face with a tall and slightly slim build. The blurry angle still prevented detectives from clearly identifying his face. However, one striking detail caught their attention: the license plate appeared to belong to the state of New York. Realizing this could be a crucial clue, they extracted individual frames to enhance the plate image and used the information to search the vehicle registration database. The results stunned the entire investigation team. The vehicle was registered under the name Heer Trun, 27 years old, residing in Yonkers, New York. And as previously suspected, the owner was not an ordinary civilian, but an officer with the New York Police Department. New Jersey police immediately contacted the New York Police Department to verify information about Heer. Initial results showed that he had been an official NYPD employee since 2021, currently working in the media unit under the Public Information Office. This meant that Heer was not a street patrol officer, but rather an office-based employee working in police communications. This detail made the case even more puzzling. Why would a young officer in a desk role become involved in such a violent street shooting? To strengthen the evidence, investigators continued reviewing Here's phone usage history. Location data showed that on the night of May 17, 2024, his device had connected to a cell tower near the crime scene, then moved along the highway toward New York shortly after the shooting occurred. This data aligned perfectly with the timeline of the dark sedan seen in the video, further reinforcing suspicion toward Here. A search warrant was quickly approved by a New Jersey court. On June 6, 2024, police arrested Here Trun at his workplace in Manhattan. He was handcuffed and escorted out of the building in front of stunned colleagues. At the time of arrest, he appeared shocked and said almost nothing, only quietly confirming his identity in Manhattan court before being extradited to New Jersey. Shortly afterward, police seized a 9mm Glock handgun, his service weapon issued by the New York Police Department, from his personal locker. The firearm was sent for forensic testing and compared with the bullets and shell casings collected at the scene. The results confirmed expectations. All evidence matched Here's weapon. With this evidence, combined with camera footage and mobile location data, police officially charged Here Trun with multiple serious offenses, including first-degree attempted murder, second-degree aggravated assault, and second-degree possession of a weapon for unlawful purposes. After being extradited to New Jersey, Here Trun appeared at a pretrial hearing at Camden County Court. Prosecutors strongly opposed granting him bail, citing concerns that he could commit similar acts if released. The judge agreed and denied bail, ordering that he remain in custody throughout the legal proceedings. From that point on, Here Trun was suspended without pay under New York Police Department policy for arrested personnel. He was later classified as a former officer once his records were updated. Thus, the search for the shooter's identity concluded with the arrest of Here Trun. But why did he open fire on Kishan Patel? What connection existed between the two men? To answer this question, police conducted a thorough investigation into Here's background, personal history, and relationships. Here Trun is a Vietnamese American living in Yonkers, a suburb of New York. Before becoming entangled in the legal system, he had a fairly respectable profile. After graduating from university, with a desire to contribute to the community, Here joined the New York Police Department in February 2021. As a young Asian officer in the police force, Here was once regarded by colleagues as hardworking and friendly. Those who knew him found it difficult to imagine that he could one day become a suspect in a violent crime. However, behind that seemingly normal exterior were hidden aspects that only came to light after the case unfolded. Here served nearly 3 years in the force and was later transferred to the department's press office, where he handled social media and external communications. This was a desk-based role with a relatively manageable workload, yet psychological records later presented by his lawyer painted a completely different picture. Here suffered from depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and alcohol addiction. It appears that in the past he may have witnessed or experienced a traumatic event during his service, leading to prolonged psychological distress. Instead of seeking professional help, Here turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism. At work, his superiors were aware of his drinking problem, but no decisive action was taken, such as confiscating his firearm or requiring mandatory treatment. As a result, a person struggling with serious mental instability continued to carry a weapon issued to protect the public until the tragedy on that fateful night occurred. The investigation revealed that there was absolutely no prior connection between Here Trun and the victim, Kishan Patel. They were complete strangers who happened to be on the same road that night. Therefore, Here's motive did not stem from personal conflict, but was likely the result of a momentary outburst. Investigators hypothesized that while driving, Here may have become irritated over a minor situation, perhaps Patel unintentionally blocking his way. In a moment of lost control, Here rolled down his window, drew his issued Glock, and fired multiple shots at close range toward Patel. Caught off guard, Patel lost consciousness immediately, causing his foot to unintentionally press the accelerator. The car sped through a red light, collided with another vehicle driven by a woman, and continued sliding several meters before coming to a stop. Witnessing the entire incident, Here did not stop to help, but instead accelerated away from the scene, disappearing into the night to avoid detection. After leaving the scene, Here stopped at a roadside gas station and calmly refueled as if nothing had happened. He then drove back home to Yonkers and went to work as usual the next morning, attempting to conceal his actions. Meanwhile, Patel was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, while the woman involved in the collision fortunately sustained only minor injuries. Another notable point is that the case raised questions about the liability of the New York Police Department. The Patel family filed a civil lawsuit seeking $300 million in damages, alleging that the department and its leadership were aware that Heer Trun was a troubled officer but failed to take appropriate action. In the lawsuit, the Patel family's attorney described Heer as a ticking time bomb, arguing that allowing him to continue carrying a firearm was the result of decades of negligence by the department in managing officers with alcohol addiction. Heer's case thus became a wake-up call about the importance of monitoring the mental health of law enforcement personnel. In summary, Heer Trun represents a typical example of a dangerous downward spiral in someone entrusted with protecting the community. From a police officer once driven by ideals of service, he became a perpetrator after a single moment of lost control. The case was quickly completed and forwarded to the court. Initially, Heer Trun faced multiple serious charges at the New Jersey Superior Court in Camden County. During the pretrial phase, his defense attorney and the prosecution engaged in negotiations. The prosecution held overwhelmingly strong evidence, while the defense understood that if the case went before a jury, their client would almost certainly face a very severe sentence. As a result, both sides began negotiating a plea agreement. By November 2025, at Camden Superior Court, Heer Trun agreed to plead guilty to one count of first-degree attempted murder in the shooting of Kishan Patel. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to drop several lesser charges and recommend a reduced sentence compared to the maximum penalty. Under this plea agreement, Heer faced a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. This was lighter than the standard sentencing range for such an offense, partly because he had no prior criminal record, had expressed remorse, and also because the victim's family wished to avoid prolonging painful court proceedings. During the plea hearing, Heer Trun appeared in an orange prison uniform, looking exhausted and visibly trembling. When asked by the judge to confirm his statement, he choked up as he admitted to shooting Kishan Patel. The prosecution then read a summary of the charges, stating that in a state of intoxication and anger, Heer used a firearm with the intent to take the victim's life. With each detail presented, Heer quietly nodded in acknowledgement. The courtroom fell into silence, broken only by muffled sobs from the back row where Patel's mother and sister sat holding each other. When given the opportunity to speak, Heer's defense attorney attempted to present mitigating circumstances. He reiterated that his client suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and alcohol addiction, arguing that this case was a painful lesson about the lack of psychological support for police officers. The attorney also stated that Heer felt deep remorse, living each day in detention burdened by guilt over his actions. However, the victim's family representative rejected this argument. Patel's brother-in-law stated that regardless of any issues Heer may have had, it could never justify using a firearm to harm an innocent person on the road. Patel's mother was too overwhelmed to speak further. She simply held up a photo of her son in court and broke down in tears, leaving the entire courtroom in heavy silence. Because both sides had reached a plea agreement, the case did not go before a jury. The official sentence is expected to be delivered in December 2025 after the judge reviews all case files and considers mitigating and aggravating factors. According to media reports, Heer Trun will most likely receive a 10-year prison sentence, the maximum under the agreement, and may also be required to participate in psychological support programs during his incarceration. Although a 10-year sentence may feel insufficient to some given the devastating consequences, the Patel family chose to accept the agreement. They simply hope to close this prolonged legal process and focus on Patel's recovery while rebuilding their lives after the tragedy. Parallel to the criminal case, the Patel family's civil lawsuit against the City of New York and the New York Police Department is still being handled in federal court in Manhattan. The case is expected to be lengthy, as the City of New York will likely strongly contest the allegations. Regardless of the outcome, the case has already created significant pressure on the police department to review its personnel management procedures, particularly in evaluating and monitoring officers' mental health. The case of a police officer shooting and critically injuring an innocent driver has become a shocking story in public opinion. From a societal perspective, it has shaken public trust in law enforcement, as someone tasked with protecting civilians became a threat to the very community he was meant to serve. American media widely covered the case, with many reports comparing it to previous incidents involving off-duty police shootings, sparking debates about behavior standards and stress management among officers outside of duty hours. Following the incident, the New York Police Department announced plans to strengthen periodic psychological evaluations and encourage officers to seek help when facing personal issues. While this may partly be a response to public pressure, there is hope that such measures will be implemented seriously to prevent similar ticking time bombs in the future. On social media, public outrage toward Heer Trun's actions was evident. Many criticized the act of carrying a firearm outside jurisdiction and using it recklessly, viewing it as a serious risk that authorities must address. Some opinions argued that a 10-year sentence is far too lenient compared to the lifelong suffering endured by the victim and his family. For the Patel family, life has been completely turned upside down. Kishan Patel, once a healthy and hardworking young man, now lives in a near-vegetative state. The image of Manjina Patel breaking down in tears and asking, "Why did he do this?" has appeared across numerous news reports, becoming a haunting symbol of the senseless brutality of this case. At around 4 a.m. on March 12, 2025, in Hayward, a city in the San Francisco Bay Area, United States, the 911 dispatch center received a broken and terrified call from the home of the elderly couple on Virginia Street. Over the phone, the trembling woman reported that an intruder had entered her home, accompanied by her husband's panicked screams in the background. As soon as Hayward police arrived, they observed that the back glass door had been smashed with a brick, and the belongings inside were scattered everywhere. The husband stated that he had just woken up to find a strange man standing in the living room. He immediately shouted for help, and the couple was forced to confront the intruder in a life-threatening situation. Notably, the man did not flee immediately, but appeared extremely aggressive, loudly arguing as if he were searching for something or someone. It was only when he saw the wife calling 911 that he panicked and fled the scene. According to the victim's description, the intruder was a middle-aged Asian man who seemed to be in an agitated or drug-influenced state. Based on their experience, investigators determined that this was not a simple burglary. The act of smashing the glass door indicated a bold and reckless break-in rather than a quiet attempt to pry it open. The question remained whether the suspect was still nearby or had already escaped. The atmosphere was extremely tense as a potentially dangerous situation was unfolding. Under the beam of flashlights, investigators began tracing the path left behind by the intruder. In the backyard, footprints pressed into the dew-covered grass led straight toward the fence. Then, a young officer, shining his light upward, was startled to spot a figure moving on the roof of a shed. It turned out that after fleeing, the suspect had climbed onto the roof of a nearby garage to hide or find a way to escape. Police quickly formed a perimeter, shining lights and loudly ordering the suspect to surrender. However, while standing precariously on the roof, the man refused to cooperate and appeared extremely panicked. He shouted incoherent phrases about a child or some kind of danger, his eyes darting wildly. Noticing signs of psychological instability, investigators tried to calm him down by lowering their voices. However, the situation quickly spiraled out of control when the suspect suddenly jumped from the roof into the backyard and continued fleeing across neighboring properties. When officers caught up with him in the front yard of a house, they discovered he was holding a screwdriver, brandishing it in a highly agitated state. Without warning, he suddenly charged at an officer with the weapon. Faced with this reckless act, law enforcement had no choice but to deploy a taser to subdue him. As the electric current caused the suspect's muscles to stiffen, other officers immediately rushed in, tackled him to the ground, and disarmed him. Following proper training procedures, officers quickly placed the suspect in the recovery position to prevent the risk of asphyxiation, as he showed signs of exhaustion. At this point, although still conscious, the man began speaking incoherently. Observing his panicked eyes and apparent lack of full awareness, officers suspected he might be under the influence of stimulants. After successfully subduing the suspect, police continued to expand their search of the surrounding area to ensure no accomplices were hiding nearby. Not far from the scene, they discovered a pickup truck parked along the roadside. Inside the vehicle were numerous personal belongings scattered around, along with several small packages suspected to be illegal substances and syringes. By checking the license plate, authorities quickly identified the vehicle's owner as Nathan Huang, 41 years old, residing in Hayward. At this point, the detained man began to show clear signs of physical exhaustion following his earlier frenzy. He was breathing heavily, his pulse racing, and sweat pouring down his body. Medical personnel immediately provided first aid and placed him onto a stretcher. Although the medical team followed proper procedures by checking vital signs and attempting to calm him, Nathan remained uncooperative, continuously struggling and shouting fragmented phrases. In response to the situation, an important decision was made. A female paramedic from Phong, the private emergency service provider in the area, administered a dose of midazolam to Nathan. This is a powerful sedative used to help calm the individual and prevent harm to himself as well as to those around him. However, just about 8 minutes after the sedative entered his system, Nathan suddenly cried out that he could not breathe and felt something unusual with his heart. Moments later, he quickly fell into a coma and stopped breathing right there in the ambulance. Faced with this critical situation, medical personnel immediately performed CPR and chest compressions throughout the transport to the hospital. However, at the emergency room, devastating news arrived. Doctors determined that Nathan Huang had gone into cardiac arrest, leading to severe brain damage due to lack of oxygen. Although he was placed on a ventilator and received intensive treatment, his brain had suffered irreversible damage. On March 21, 2025, Nathan Huang was declared dead after 9 days in the hospital with no chance of recovery. What initially seemed like a routine apprehension had quickly turned into an extremely complex tragedy. The perpetrator, who was also the victim in this case, was Nathan Huang, 41 years old. He was a Vietnamese American living in the city of Hayward. Nathan enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at the age of 19 and served 2 deployments in Iraq. Returning from the horrors of war, Nathan carried deep psychological wounds and suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite this, he tried to rebuild his life by starting a family and becoming the father of 6 children. According to Cynthia Fernandez, his ex-wife who had lived with him for many years, Nathan was a devoted father who loved his children deeply and had a very gentle and kind nature. However, tragedy began to unfold when he started struggling with severe mental health issues. Recurring nightmares and terrifying memories from his past constantly haunted him. He frequently experienced psychotic episodes and believed that his family was in imminent danger. Cynthia shared that during these episodes, her ex-husband would panic, thinking that someone was trying to harm his children, and he felt it was his responsibility to become a hero to protect his family. Because of this, although normally gentle, Nathan would sometimes act uncontrollably under the heavy influence of his post-war mental condition. In addition to his psychological struggles, Nathan's family situation was also far from stable. After his marriage with Cynthia ended, he no longer lived with his wife and children. One of his daughters was living with relatives in Hayward, and this child became the center of a tense custody dispute between Nathan and his ex-wife's family. According to court records, he was actively fighting for visitation or custody rights of his young daughter. Notably, in the early morning of the day the incident occurred, Nathan was scheduled to take his daughter to court. On the night of March 11th, leading into the early morning of March 12, 2025, just hours before the break-in at the elderly couple's home, Nathan went to the house where his daughter was living on Virginia Street, hoping to see her. According to the relatives caring for the child, Nathan arrived at around 1 a.m. He knocked on the door and requested to take his daughter with him, claiming it was to prepare for the upcoming court hearing. However, the homeowners quickly noticed that Nathan was behaving unusually and suspected he might be under the influence of drugs. As a result, they firmly refused to open the door and demanded that he leave immediately, reminding him that any matters concerning the child had to be handled through legal channels. Frustrated by the refusal, Nathan argued for some time before eventually leaving. No one expected that just about 3 hours later, Nathan would reappear nearby, but mistakenly go to a different house with a similar design on the same street. Perhaps in his delusional state, he believed that his daughter was in danger inside that house. This explains why Nathan aggressively threw a brick to smash the glass door and forced his way into the elderly couple's home, a house completely unfamiliar to him, in what he believed was an attempt to rescue his child. In addition to his psychological issues, the investigation report revealed that Nathan Huang tested positive for methamphetamine. His use of this illegal substance may have been an attempt to escape his past trauma, but ironically, it worsened his mental condition. The stimulant pushed Nathan into an extremely agitated state on the night of the incident. This was evident in his extraordinary resistance and the fact that he appeared to feel almost no pain when he jumped from a shed roof over 3 meters high to the ground or when he was struck multiple times by a taser. Furthermore, examination results showed that Nathan's heart exhibited signs of enlargement, a condition often associated with prolonged stress and the effects of stimulant use. Immediately after the incident, the Hayward Police Department classified it as a serious case and activated a multi-agency investigation process. The Criminal Investigation Division quickly opened a case regarding Nathan Huang's actions, treating him as a suspect in an unlawful residential break-in. At the same time, since Nathan died during the restraint process, the Alameda County District Attorney's Office also stepped in to conduct an independent investigation. The goal was to determine whether any criminal misconduct by police officers or paramedics contributed to this outcome. In addition, the Hayward Police Department invited an independent consulting team consisting of use of force experts to work alongside the Internal Affairs Unit. They would conduct an administrative investigation to assess whether officers followed proper policies and procedures. These decisive actions reflected the seriousness and sensitivity of the case in the eyes of authorities. In the early days of the investigation, authorities focused their full efforts on collecting evidence from the scene and gathering witness statements. The combination of testimonies from the elderly couple and information from the family caring for Nathan's daughter helped clarify the true motive behind Nathan Huang's seemingly irrational actions. In terms of physical evidence, police recovered the brick used to break the glass door, the screwdriver Nathan had been holding, and most importantly, security camera footage from a neighboring house that captured part of the rooftop chase. These pieces of evidence vividly reconstructed the sequence of events, showing that officers had attempted to negotiate, but Nathan remained uncooperative and fled. The situation ultimately forced them to deploy a taser after he threatened officers with a weapon. Another key piece of evidence was the autopsy report conducted by the Alameda County Coroner's Office. Although Nathan passed away on March 21st, it took several weeks of careful examination and analysis before the report was officially completed. According to the findings, the cause of death was determined to be hypoxic brain injury, a consequence of cardiac arrest. This critical condition resulted from a combination of factors, including methamphetamine intoxication, an enlarged heart condition, and extreme physical exertion and stress during the struggle with police. In other words, examiners concluded that Nathan's death was the result of excited delirium syndrome. This is a condition that occurs when a person uses stimulants and becomes excessively agitated, potentially leading to sudden cardiac failure. Another notable point is that the forensic report did not directly conclude that the midazolam injection was the primary cause of death. However, it also did not completely rule out the possibility that this sedative may have contributed to lowered blood pressure and respiratory failure in a body already affected by illegal substances. During the investigation, however, a major obstacle emerged. The Phong paramedic who directly administered midazolam to Nathan, along with several firefighters who were present to assist that day, chose to remain silent when questioned by major crimes investigators. This silence made it difficult for investigators to determine how the decision to administer the drug was made. Was it at the request of the police, or was it an independent medical judgment? At that point, all available information relied solely on written records and incident reports. According to the records, the administered dose of midazolam fully complied with medical protocols, meaning it was within the acceptable range for sedating an adult. Based on this data, investigators hypothesized that the combination of the sedative and the methamphetamine in Nathan's system, along with his highly stressed physical condition, led to his cardiac arrest. Although the internal investigation was conducted urgently, the Hayward Police Department made a critical mistake by failing to disclose information about the incident to the public for more than a month afterward. This was considered highly unusual, as deaths involving police are typically announced early to ensure transparency. It was not until late April 2025 that journalists uncovered the case through court records submitted to prosecutors. Shortly after, reporters from Bay Area News Group published an investigative article revealing shocking details to the public that a man had died after being subdued by Hayward police and injected with a controversial sedative. This information quickly sparked public outrage, as people had previously been completely unaware of the incident. Under increasing public pressure, the Hayward police chief was forced to speak out. He explained that the reason for the delayed disclosure was due to the particularly sensitive nature of the case. The department wanted to avoid unfounded speculation that could affect witness statements and compromise the objectivity of the investigation. Although this explanation was somewhat reasonable, the decision to withhold information for 6 weeks still raised serious concerns among residents and activists about the transparency of the Hayward Police Department. Eventually, under immense pressure, on August 20th, 2025, the department released a compiled video of the incident. The footage included audio from the couple's 911 call, as well as body camera recordings from the officers present at the scene. The release of this video partially eased public skepticism. The footage confirmed that Nathan had indeed displayed dangerous behavior before being subdued, while also showing that the police handled the tense situation in accordance with proper procedures. However, it also raised further questions, as the video was cut right before the moment the sedative was administered and did not provide any additional information about that controversial medical decision. As a result, in the eyes of the public, the core mystery of the case remained unresolved. Meanwhile, the lawyer representing Nathan Huang's family was actively gathering independent evidence in preparation for further legal action. They questioned whether the decision to use a sedative was an attempt to save a life or, in fact, a fatal mistake, and if there was wrongdoing, who should be held responsible. To find the answer, we need to revisit the specific decisions made on that fateful night. First, the group of police officers involved in subduing Nathan Huang. According to case records, 4 key individuals were involved: Justin Puetzer, Jiang, Lutzinger, and Macias. All were officers from the Hayward Police Department and were on patrol at the time of the incident. Upon receiving the report from the 911 dispatch center, this group of officers responded very quickly. They identified the situation as a dangerous break-in and approached the scene with a high level of caution. Officer Justin Puetzer was identified as the one who deployed the taser that caused Nathan to collapse. Immediately afterward, Officers Jiang and Macias moved in to restrain and handcuff him, while Officer Lutzinger was responsible for providing support and ensuring the suspect was placed in a safe position. It appears that these officers acted within the scope of their duties and had no intention of causing harm to Nathan. Additionally, in the use of force report filed immediately after the incident, the police stated that they only used the taser when Nathan charged at them with a screwdriver. They also emphasized that the suspect was placed in a safe position immediately after being subdued to ensure his airway remained clear. This detail is particularly important, as in the past there have been cases where suspects died after being held face down for too long, leading to asphyxiation. Therefore, in this case, the police sought to demonstrate that they strictly followed proper procedures to protect the suspect's life. The paramedic who administered midazolam to Nathan was Erica Lopez, an emergency medical technician from Falk USA, a private company responsible for ambulance services in Hayward. Accompanying her that night was Dominic Fiendor, her colleague on the same ambulance team. They arrived at the scene shortly after Nathan was subdued by police to provide care and transport him to the hospital. In pre-hospital emergency care, the use of sedatives for highly agitated individuals is often considered a necessary measure to ensure the safety of both the patient and those around them. In Erica Lopez's case, it is likely that she was simply following professional guidelines as well as instructions from the police when she decided to administer midazolam to Nathan. As for Falk USA, the overseeing organization, they cited patient confidentiality laws in refusing to provide detailed comments. However, the company also affirmed its full support for the actions taken by its paramedics. This indicates that, from the company's perspective, Erica Lopez did not violate any procedures. Nevertheless, the case of Nathan Huang is not the first instance of death following the administration of sedatives by paramedics. Across the United States, dozens of deaths have been recorded in connection with the use of midazolam on restrained individuals. According to an investigation by the Associated Press, from 2012 to 2021, there were at least 94 deaths linked to this drug, including 16 cases in California alone. Therefore, Nathan Huang's case is still being reviewed by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office as a potential case of involuntary manslaughter. In other words, if the investigation determines that the sedative was the cause of the unintended death, the medical personnel involved could potentially face criminal liability. As of late 2025, the investigation results have not yet been finalized, and the Alameda County District Attorney's Office has not brought any criminal charges against the individuals involved. Following standard procedure, prosecutors are carefully reviewing all aspects of the case, particularly the decision to administer midazolam, to determine whether it was truly necessary and in compliance with medical regulations. In practice, criminal prosecution in cases like this is rare unless authorities find clear evidence that someone acted negligently or maliciously beyond the scope of their duties. In this case, however, the forensic report identified multiple internal factors from the victim that contributed to his death, making it even more difficult to pursue criminal charges against either the police or medical personnel. Refusing to wait passively for the criminal investigation's conclusion, Nathan Huang's family took their own legal action. On September 30th, 2025, his ex-wife, Cynthia Fernandez, along with several family members, officially filed a civil lawsuit in federal court. They sued the Hayward Police Department, the city government, and related individuals for violating civil rights and causing the victim's death. In the lawsuit, the defendants specifically named include the City of Hayward, 4 police officers, 2 medical personnel, and Falk USA. The family's attorneys strongly argued that the combination of police use of force and the paramedics' administration of a sedative constituted unlawful excessive force. This, they claimed, seriously violated the victim's right to bodily integrity as well as his right to receive proper medical care. In addition, the lawsuit also mentions the police department's delay in disclosing information as a sign of a possible cover-up. Based on this, the family is seeking appropriate compensation, especially for Nathan's 6 children, who are now forced to grow up without their father. It can be said that the death of Nathan Huang is a multi-layered tragedy, leaving a heavy impact on both the community and law enforcement. In this case, the line between right and wrong is far from easy to define. From a social perspective, the incident has caused significant shock across the San Francisco Bay Area, particularly within the veteran and Vietnamese American communities. This stems not only from the tragic nature of the case, but also from the initial lack of transparency in how information was handled by the police. On social media, a page titled Justice for Nathan has attracted thousands of followers, where people are calling for accountability from all parties involved. What do you think about the responsibility of the police and the medical personnel in this case, and what do you believe truly caused the tragedy of Nathan Huang? Feel free to leave a comment below to share your thoughts or perspectives. If you find this content interesting, please share it with your friends and give the video a like to support us. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so you won't miss the next compelling case files. Goodbye, and see you again.